Hi, I'm Rick Dior, and this is part 3 of my Health and Wellness for Drummers series. So I already did part 1, and in part 1 I talked about hearing and protecting your hearing. In part 2 I talked about how to protect your hands, your arms, your elbows, and your shoulders. Also a little about posture. In this episode I'm going to talk about how to work on drum set and practice drum set safely, so you can have a really long career and not develop back and neck problems and all those kinds of things. We're also going to be spending some time on the feet, I should say, both feet, the hi-hat foot and the bass drum foot. But first, I want to talk a little more about the hearing. I've gotten a lot of questions actually in the short time since I put that video up. And one thing I do want to explain is the difference between the types of earplugs. So these right here are foam earplugs. And I'll post a thing on the screen so you can see them a little closer. The molded earplugs I was talking about are earplugs that if you go to an audiologist, they will do a mold of your ear, and then you get a piece back, or two pieces, one for each ear, that are kind of a rubberized polymer, and then they put filters in those that you can take in and out. So you can have filters that are anywhere from 6 dBs all the way up to 25 dBs. I know in that first video I said 15, but I checked, and now they have 25 dBs. So that's great. I'm going to actually get a set of those filters to fit into my plugs. But if you need more than that, your only solution, or the best solution I would say, would be these foam plugs. These take out up to 35 dBs, which is quite a lot. And these particular ones, these orange ones, they take out 30 dBs, which is plenty for almost any kind of gig, unless you're working inside a jet engine. I think that you'll be safe with these. Now, I like these particular orange ones. I'll tell you the brand. I'm not any kind of endorser. I don't have a deal. It's just I've tried so many of these, and these are my favorite. These are called Firm Fit, and they're made by a company called Howard Light, L-E-I-G-H-T. I think it's a Honeywell company, actually, the same folks who make your air conditioner filters. So these take out 30 dBs, and they're class 4, which is a high class for sound, deduction, I should say, or reduction. So that's what I'd recommend. Now, you can also get these white ones. I have a lot of these left over from the old days. The only problem with these is they're pretty firm, and they will irritate your ear after a while if you take them in and out. They kind of actually sand down the inside of your ear. These are much, much softer, so they don't do much damage. Now let's talk about how to put these in. So what you do is you take your fingers, make sure they're clean, and you roll this tip between your fingers so it goes like that. And then you take that and put it in your ear and push lightly in, and then that will expand inside your ear and create kind of a closed door where not much can get in. The problem with these foam plugs is that they will take out a lot of the top end. The other ones, the ones that are fitted and that you get the filters for, they're pretty much uniform across the frequency spectrum. But these foam ones will take out quite a bit of top end. Now that makes playing the drums actually quite a bit more pleasant a lot of times, but they will sound a little dull and you will not get the top end. But they definitely will not make your ears ring. Then the other situation that we talked about in the hearing video was headphones. I took out 3 sets of headphones today that I use regularly, and they're all a little bit different, so let's talk about those really quick. And once again, to tell you what I told you in the other video, is I'll put earplugs in and then put the headphones over those when I'm listening to a click or music or doing a session. I do not like in-ear monitors for the reason that I think they're dangerous for your naked ears. And again, you can go back to the first video and look at that because I talk a lot about that. So these are Sony's. I've had these for a really long time. And these are MDR-7506. These are really great headphones. They sound great. They last a really long time. All the parts are replaceable. So I've replaced all the parts on these 4 different times. I've had these for about 20 years, and they look brand new now. I just replaced all the parts. You could find those on eBay or really anywhere on the internet. All right, so those are the best sounding ones. And if you could find a set of used one of these for well under $100, and these sound great. The other option that sound really good are the Sennheiser. These are the HD280 Pro. The good thing about these is they will block out any noise coming from out of the headphones. So if you're using a loud click track with a beep, that will not bleed. These are some serious closed air headphones. They pretty much vacuum against your ears. The bad thing about them is they get uncomfortable after a couple hours. And like I said in that first video, usually I'm in the studio doing something with headphones for 8 to 9 hours a day, and it can become excruciating after a while. So these are great for short times. Now the cheap option are these Audio-Technica headphones, and they're the ATH-M20X. And they no longer make these, but they do make several other phones, and these are pretty cheap. You can get these for like $30. And they are very, very light, and they are comfortable for a long period of time. Not as comfortable as the Sonys, but they're comfortable, and they do a great job. And they're kind of disposable. They're so cheap that, you know, if something happens to them, or you just, you know, sweat so much they become disgusting, you can just toss them away and get another pair. I have about 7 pairs of these, and I use these sometimes with the other studio musicians who use a lot of hairspray and stuff, so I'm not too worried about them, okay? So those are your headphone options, and of course, there's so many kinds of headphones. I'm sure all of you have your favorites, but these are the 3 that I normally cycle through. So again, if there's any other questions about the hearing, please send me an email on that so I can, you know, or make a comment and I'll return an answer in YouTube. Now let's talk about posture. So all of us will slouch and lean from time to time, but you want to try to sit up as straight as possible so you don't put strain on your neck and your back. Now by sitting up straight, I don't mean like this with your chest out necessarily, although that is the proper way to sit. I doubt anybody's going to end up doing that on the drum set because you're moving around on the drums. What I do mean, though, by good posture is putting the weight on your torso. So a lot of folks play and they put the weight on the feet, which is how they're used to walking and maybe even sitting. But when you play drum set, you can't put your weight on your feet because then you can't do anything complex coordination-wise. If weight's always on one of your feet, then your balance is going to be off. So what I do is somewhat lean back and try to put weight on my torso. So like I try to tell my students, picture a tree and there's a tree trunk and then you have all the limbs. So normally when there's a big storm, you know, not a hurricane, but a big storm, that trunk will not move, okay? But the limbs will move. So that trunk is stable. It's always there. It's solid. It's kind of a balance, a center. And that's what you want to think of your drum throne as and the way you sit. So when you first sit down at the drums, the best thing to do is just sit in your chair. And as far as a throne that you use, you can use a bicycle seat throne. Everybody knows what those are. I'll show you some pictures. Or you could use a round throne. I like a throne with a lot of cushion because I do a lot of sitting. So there's different ones. Pork Pie makes a great drum throne. I don't know if you guys have checked that out. Rock and Sock also makes good drum thrones. So you might want to check those out. But what I do and what I tell my students to do is just sit and plant your feet. And then wherever those feet land naturally, comfortably, that's where you want to put your hi-hat and your bass drum pedal. You don't want it out like that. You don't want it like this. You don't want it too close. You don't want it too far away. Because if that's the case, you're going to end up straining yourself. You could strain your groin. You're definitely going to strain your lower back. Okay? And of course, the deadly knee injuries, lots of drummers have those. Now that happens when your leg is actually in front of the rest of your foot and your calf. So you don't want that. You want your leg to be kind of like this, straight, and then slightly angled forward. And we'll see if I can show you a picture of that. All right, so when that happens, that lets you put that weight on your torso and lets your legs go up and down and your feet go up and down, which is what you want to do when you play the pedals. And there's lots and lots of different technique involved with that. And I've covered some of these techniques. If you look at my bass drum and hi-hat technique video, you'll see lots of that. And we'll do a little more of that today. But the main thing is that you're kind of planted in the ground on your torso, not putting weight on your feet. Then you'll always feel balanced and you won't feel like you're unsettled. Now, when you play on the kit, like a simple groove, okay, you want to really feel like the weight, again, is on your torso and that your feet are basically moving independently, not at the same time. They will move at the same time sometimes if you're doing, but we don't do that too often, at least anymore, on the drum kit. Most of the time your feet are going to be moving independently. That's why the weight needs to be on your torso. So when you play a simple groove like that, you can lean your body in to the hi-hat. Probably some of you have noticed when I'm playing hi-hat stuff, I lean into it. That's okay. That's not going to do any damage to anything. Now, if you're doing this, of course, that might do damage to your neck and your back. But if you lean in like this, it's not going to do damage. And certain things you want to do that with. So if I'm playing jazz, then I'm right here like this, and I'm not having to lean in too much. But if I'm doing this, then I want to kind of lean in to give myself a little bit of shoulder room on that hi-hat. All right? So some people think that if you do that, you lean certain ways. That's bad. I do not. And again, I've been doing that for 50 years, and my body, I think, is in pretty good shape for being kind of old. All right? I have no pain, no back trouble, no neck trouble, nothing. So I would suggest that you not try to stand up or sit down ramrod straight, like, you know, a military officer or something, is that you can move your body around as long as, like I keep saying, that torso, the weight is there. Now, let's talk about playing with the different grips. So I've heard a lot of people talk about, and I've had my students ask me about, when I play traditional crossed like this. And they say that when they come up, they don't have enough room. Well, the thing with that is you want to make sure that you can generate a lot of power with your left hand by not having to raise it like this. If you're doing that, then you're going to definitely hurt yourself. You're probably going to hurt your shoulder, and you're going to hurt your thumb right in here badly because there's so much weight coming down on that. So you all have to learn how to generate power from down low. The way I do that is with a clinch with my thumb. So if you see that wrist movement, it doesn't have to come up really high to do that. Okay? So that's something you probably want to work on a little bit. It'll save a lot of wear and tear on your forearms, your fingers, and definitely your elbow. So the way I play, if you watch my bass drum video, is I play heel up. So that means my heel is like this. Now it's not really high up, it's only like that high up. And I'm on the ball of my foot. I am not on my toes. You don't want to do that. And the most important thing to me is that that bass drum beater is not sticking in the head like this. So if you do that, first of all, you're killing the sound of your bass drum by half at least. And then also, you're putting pressure on your shins. You can develop something called shin splints, which are these microfractures. Runners get them a lot. It's from impact. And then that really hurts. I've never had it, but apparently from some of the students that I've taught who have it, it's very, very painful. So I'm sure it really hurts. So the thing is to try to alleviate that by coming off that head and bouncing off of it. It's the equivalent of doing this, as opposed to, and of course in my first video on your hands, I talked about how that can really damage your arm, your forearm. So that's the thing. You can play flat-footed. That's fine. The problem playing flat-footed is you're never going to be able to play certain things at a certain volume. And, you know, you can argue with me about that, but it's the truth. Because I play flat-footed as well. And I try to play things really fast, like if I'm playing. Really, really fast shuffles with one bass drum, not two. It's almost impossible to do that flat-footed at the volume you might need to play a heavy rock gig. Okay? Now, when I play jazz and I ghost or feather that bass drum, when I'm doing that, I am playing a little more flat-footed. In other words, my heel is farther down. Not all the way down, but pretty far down. I have to keep it up a little to keep that beater close to that head. Of course, if you want to play really soft like that, then you need to have the beater no more than 1 or 2 inches away from the head, like this. Okay? So that's really something to work on. Now, I also use a side-to-side motion. And let me move this snare drum stand a little so you can see better. So that's called a foot pivot. I'm pivoting on the ball of my foot. And that's really, really useful for playing like fast sambas. All right, that's a samba in 3, so. Now the beauty of that pivot is it's kind of an ongoing motion, perpetual motion. You set it in motion and it just goes. Any kind of repetitive motion like that, it's really easy to learn complex coordination with. So if I'm splashing my hi-hat, I do the same thing. So you can see those splashes, how it's side to side. Now when you do your hi-hat splashes, you want to put your heel forward like this. And if you have big feet, I don't, but if you have anything bigger than a size 10, you're probably going to want to move your foot sideways, like that. So you can do some neat things with the hi-hat. So there, I'm getting my hi-hat going in perpetual motion, splashes, and then I'm free to do whatever I want with my bass drum foot, because again, it's perpetual motion. That's a little bit harder to do with any kind of heel down. Now, I would say it's almost impossible to do on the hi-hat with heel down. I've never seen anyone do that. So let me know if you have. Okay, so the way my feet work is they're always kind of dancing on the pedals. And once again, the weight is on my torso. So it's not forward like that. It's always back. So my feet can pretty much do anything, and it's very comfortable to do that. Now let's talk about some exercises you can do to improve your balance with your feet to avoid injury and strengthen your feet to avoid injury. So we just talked about the strain you can put on your feet by playing into the drum. So what you want to do to avoid that is do some technical exercises with your feet so you could learn to do things where you're basically sitting back on that pedal like this. So the first thing that I'd like you to try at home is just doing your hi-hat on quarter notes. And when I do that, I lift up my foot like this. I always like to play heel up on the hi-hat so then that splash is available. Okay, so if you just do basic quarter notes on your hi-hat with your left foot and then just play eighth notes with your bass drum. Now, while you're doing that, I want you to put your hands flat on your floor tom and your snare drum, but don't put the weight on your hands. Put the weight on your torso. Now remember, you're lifting up the hi-hat foot and the bass drum foot. Now this does not come naturally because it's not the way we walk, okay? We walk, we land our feet flat on the ground, but this time we're floating our feet, so it should sound and look like this. Now I want you to do that until it feels really comfortable. In other words, it doesn't change from when you're not playing to when you're playing. And that's actually difficult. And then try different things, okay? So one thing that I like to do and I like to have my students do is just different rhythms while we're keeping that hi-hat on all four. So there's some rhythms in my book, my drum set book on page 7 and 8. You could use the Louis Bellson books. There's tons of rhythms. But this page, page 7, these are 16th note rhythms. So that first line would sound like this. Now you want to do those kinds of things without leaving the beater in the head. And of course you could do them slower. I'm just trying to save a little time here and doing them faster. But that bass drum beater should not be pushed into the head. It should bounce off the head. All right? Now the next page, page 8, has some 2-note groupings. And I'll go a little slower. They sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now again, you're going to leave your hands on the drums and try to relax. So we're not even using sticks yet. The first goal is to get our feet, both of them, to be relaxed while our torso is planted in that seat and you're not leaning forward. Now a lot of you, when you try this, you'll say, oh, that looks easy on the video, but when you try it, it's not going to be easy. And if it doesn't feel right, that means your balance is off and you need to fix that. Okay? So logically, the next step is to start using some sticks. And when you do that, the danger is the balance can get thrown off again. So the first thing I like my students to do, like we talked about in that video, is to just do a reset, where you put your arms by your side and you just relax, especially your shoulders. And then you bring up your hands like that, okay? Or if you play matched, or if you play, left hand lead, whatever you do, okay? I know a lot of you play a lot differently out there, but I'm going to play just crossed today. So if you do this match grip, you can just do a simple thing where you're just playing this beat. Now that's the first groove in the coordination sequence from my book on page 179, for those of you who have it. I have a whole coordination sequence there of over 20 kind of beats you play where you play your feet under them to develop this. So we'll just do the easiest one, which is that first one. And then you go back to page 7 and you maintain that feeling, that balance, that weight on your torso, and you play that with your bass drum now while the hi-hat now is closed. Okay? But avoid putting the weight on that closed hi-hat foot. There's just a little bit of weight to keep it closed, but you shouldn't be leaning on it. A lot of drummers do that when they play the hi-hat. You don't need a lot to keep it closed, just the weight of your leg. I mean, unless you're 6 years old, then you might need something else. But, you know, an adult with a leg that's more than 25 pounds shouldn't need anything else. So just put, you know, close your hi-hat and leave your foot on there and rest it on there. Okay, so that's line 1 of page 7. Now do the same thing with line 1 of page 8. Now, if you find yourself trying to push your bass drum into that, go slower. That's a really good exercise anyway, to go slower. And try to use a click when you're doing that on 16ths, okay? Then the next step is to open that hi-hat, all right? So let's say we just do a simple disco beat like this. Well, there, the hi-hat now is going to be what we did before on the downbeat. Because if you put it on the downbeat, the difference now, though, is to get those opens, you got to keep your heel down on the hi-hat. All right? Because if I don't, this is what it sounds like. If your heel's down. So again, that's an instance where you want to keep your heel down on the hi-hat so you can get those opens. So let's try that. So you're probably going to have some difficulty with that because of the coordination now with the feet. So unlike before where the heel was up, now it's down. And every time you change something like that with your bass drum or your hi-hat, it creates a whole new level of coordination. The goal is to do enough of these types of exercises where you're not even thinking about it anymore. You can just do anything by just thinking about what you want to play, not how it's going to work. That's why you practice. That's why you do this. Okay? So these are balance exercises for the health of your legs, your feet, your back. Now, drummers have lower back problems for a few reasons, okay? This is my belief anyway. I don't, but I know some drummers who do, and then I watch the way they sit, and some of them sit really low, so they're almost playing uphill. That's not good. That puts pressure on your lower back, all right? So you want to kind of sit parallel or maybe a little higher so your leg is either straight or just a little angle, which is what I do. So the height of my snare drum is just below my navel. We talked about this in the first video, all right? The height of my hi-hat is about 4 inches above the snare drum, whether I play matched, which you just saw me doing, or traditional. So if the hi-hat's up here and the snare drum's down there, you're going to end up doing that. That's going to strain your shoulders. All right? So these are kind of common sense things, but the setups that I see and people playing them, to me, make no sense. And again, the goal is to be able to play for, you know, like Roy Haynes for 80-something years, however long he's been playing drums. He's 92 now, so probably he's been playing over 80 years, which is ridiculous, okay? So a lot of the old jazz drummers were able to play a long time because they actually had really good technique and posture, and of course they had to play the kind of stuff they did or do. So these are really important things to think about. So you can sit a little higher, and the only thing that's going to do is put more strain on your upper body when you want to slouch over the drums when you're sitting up really high. So just split the difference. You could be a couple inches above straight, like if you sit in a regular chair. All right? So that's important. So now, the next step with these exercises to get your balance would be to do some really complicated kinds of hi-hat technique, opens. So like, let's say we wanted to play in 3/4. So there's my hi-hat splashing in 3/4. So again, get that going so it's perpetual motion. So these are very advanced things, but that's great for the strength of your foot. Now you're going to feel that in your calf. Anytime you do something like that, it's going to start burning. That's okay. You're not doing any permanent damage. You're just building muscle. And it took me a long time to do that. I remember when I was working on splash clave, which is this. So that's where you take the clave rhythm and then you're splashing certain beats. And I had to work on that for like a year to get that comfortable doing, because before I was doing, so it's a different length, and that's a rhythm like, so it drove me nuts, but finally I got it. And it was painful too. Again, no problem after, when I wasn't practicing at all, but just when you're practicing, you're building muscle. And then after doing it every day for a couple hours, for a few months, and then of course a year, I don't even feel it anymore. I can go on like that forever. So the point is, a lot of these exercises you're going to do are going to maybe be a little bit painful as far as muscle building, all right? But eventually, that's going to go away, and you're going to build that muscle. The same thing we talked about in that first video with the shoulder problem, when I was telling you about doing, Latin rhythms on the bell. The same issue with that, where my shoulder was hurting when I was a little kid, now I don't ever think about that. It's just nothing. Because again, all these muscles get really strong over time. All right. Now the problem that you might have is when you're away from the drums and something's hurting for more than a week, then you got an issue. Okay, and then you probably need to either stop playing for a week or maybe just at least a couple days and see if it goes away, which is what I recommend, or go see a doctor. But don't do surgery unless you get like 4 or 5 opinions, okay? So it's probably nothing bad. You probably just strained something. So listen to your body. If it hurts away from the drums, stop. And if it hurts while you're playing the drums, stop, okay? And then go back the next day and you do a little longer and a little longer. Now, let's talk a little about cymbal placement. You see I have a few cymbals here, 5 to be exact, but this is a closed hi-hat. And I like my cymbals to be really close. I'm kind of a nightmare for, a sound engineer. I am an engineer, so I use mics that are very small and very close. But when I do gigs and all my drums have to be mic'd, they look at my kit and they're like, because it's so difficult. Well, I just tell them to put a couple overheads up and a kick mic, and we're good to go, because I know how to balance my playing. And then they do that, and they're happy. So normally the toms aren't going to get mic'd too close, all right, like that. That's a problem. They'll stick mics everywhere, and it makes it hard for you to play when that's the case. So if that happens to you, if you're on a live gig and you got some sound guy putting mics everywhere where you're going to play, you tell him or her, get those out of here, move them back, because that could injure you, If you think that you're going to hit a mic, you start playing tight and differently. And I have no problem saying that to anybody, and they listen. So, they're not in charge, you're in charge, you're the entertainment. They're just doing sound reinforcement. So a couple overheads, a kick mic, maybe a snare mic, but you should not have mics in your playing area. That's my opinion. So the cymbal should be close. You see this ride, how close that is. And my general rule is you should be able to reach out, not extend your arm all the way, but just almost all the way, and play that bell with the upper shaft of your stick. If you're reaching all the way here, then it's too far away, okay? And I have short arms. I'm a short guy. I'm 5'7". So most of you folks are going to have much longer arms than me. But you see, my cymbals are very tight. As far as crashes go, they're also tight. So I like this crash to be right above my ride, just like, so I can do that, all right? So. And any other cymbal, you should just be able to reach out and touch it. Now, this a crash on my left, a lot of times I'll do crashes like this. So where I'm playing with that part of the stick. I like it. I think it sounds good and it looks really cool too. All right, I first saw Steve Gadd do that years and years ago when I saw him live with this band Stuff. I thought it was great and it sounded great. So that's one way you could play traditional crashes very easily. Now to do that, you got to have your cymbal close, so you can just do that. Now if you're playing match, it's not a problem. Okay? So those are things that you want to try to do. Same thing with the hi-hat. You want it so you can put your wrist down and use the shaft of that hi-hat. So if you're doing this kind of motion, you want that really available, the shaft, so you can bend your hand and then come up with the tip. If you're doing push-pull, in that technique, and I did a whole video on that, you can find that easily, is I do lift my arm up just a little. That's the only exception, because to do that, you need to get above that threshold there. So you're going to have to build some strength in your shoulders to do that. So I hope this helps. It's going to be a long video, and I'm sure I'll get some questions, and if we need to do another one of these, we will. So take care.